Yo, what's up, everyone? This is Terry again with College Football Stop. Bringing you another show today. Obviously, we had a big weekend of college football, some really cool games. Ohio State did not play though, so um, can't wait to get back to having Ohio State games on Saturday coming up this weekend. And we don't have any more bye weeks throughout the year until the wait for like bowl game playoffs and whatnot. So it should be a good rest of the year for Ohio State. That was one of the main things I wanted to talk about today. Was Ohio State's remaining schedule, and can they win out? They got some tough games, but can they do it? Can they win out and win the Big Ten this year? We're gonna dive into each game a little bit and see what I'm expecting from each game, and if they can make that run because they do have a really tough stretch of games coming up. Actually, starting with this Maryland game, so we'll get into that though. The first thing I wanted to do before we go and dig into Ohio State's schedule is just kind of look around college football. What happened in week 5? What games were interesting? What we learned? Again, I'm not going to go too in depth on any of these teams because I don't study them the way I do Ohio State, but I do love college football and I like to follow it and what's going on. So the first thing I want to talk about, as far as nationally, Utah. Utah is a team that's been kind of hyped up. People expect them to. They want. I think they won the Pac-12 the last 2 years in a row. But DJU beat them from DJU transfer from Clemson to Oregon State, and they beat Utah this weekend, 21-7. I've been hearing a lot of people saying like Utah's quarterback is not playing, but we're like almost 4 or 5 games into the season, he hasn't played yet. So I think the guy that's playing for them is their quarterback, and the other guy might not really get too much time. All right, yo, what's up, Mark? Man, thanks for coming out, brother. If you got any questions, let me know, Mark, or whoever else is in the chat. If you got questions, let me know. Obviously, hit the like button if you're enjoying the content here. But definitely would like to make it a conversational thing if we can. So, and then the next team I wanted to talk about, Penn State. They won 41-13 over Northwestern. A lot of people talked bad about Penn State this weekend, probably myself included on Twitter. But I mean, they got the job done. They pulled away. They covered the spread on their game. I mean, Penn State's a really good team, and when they play against good teams, they always show up. So I expect a battle with them coming up here in a couple weeks. But we got a few games to get to before that. The next game, Kentucky versus Florida. Kentucky's undefeated right now. Now they're one of them teams that usually starts the year out kind of going undefeated, winning some games, and they finish with 4 or 5 losses. So we'll see how it plays out. But Florida, their fans were pretty optimistic, and they got kind of whooped on. They got beat 33-14. All right, and then a few more games I want to talk about here. Obviously, the hype train, Colorado. Everybody is on the Colorado hype, including myself. I love what Deion Sanders is doing out there. I think that the culture he's bringing out there and how all his players look like they're having fun. They love playing football, and I don't see how you couldn't playing for Deion. Obviously, he's gonna get on your ass and make you get after it. But if as long as you're doing that, what you should be doing that at this level anyway, he seems like he would be the most fun to play with because you could just be yourself. But they played USC. Everybody thought that USC was going to blow them out, and it looked like that for most of the game. Colorado made a huge comeback at the end. Unfortunately, they couldn't finish it off. They ended up losing 48-41. I mean, I don't know, man. That USC's defense is terrible, and that's just something that they're going to have to deal with. Lincoln Riley, I think, just doesn't care. And with the way the Pac-12 is set up this year, um, I mean, I don't see USC making it to the playoffs. I see them losing probably 2 games within their schedule. And then the last couple games here I wanted to talk about. Let me see here. Georgia had a tough game with Auburn, 27-20. They won. When you're that type of team like Georgia, it's the same thing with Ohio State. You may run into an opponent that plays up to your level. You play down. You just got to get out of there with a win. And they did, and it's a game that nobody will remember as long as they keep winning how they're supposed to. Michigan blew Nebraska out. That was the most dominant game I've seen them play this year. So kudos to them. Their offense is starting to look a little bit better. Um, that's a dangerous team. It's a team that we're just going to have to deal with. So we'll see how that plays out late in the year. And then the last one I wanted to talk about here was Notre Dame versus Duke. This game was a battle to the very end. And a lot of people are talking a lot of trash, like, oh, Ohio State played a bad Notre Dame team. Listen, I don't care what anybody says. They got NFL players on that team. And, I know that just from watching them play. I know they have NFL players on their defense, and a few on their offense too. Notre Dame's a good team. And I mean, they play USC. That's one of the teams that I've already talked about. I think Notre Dame's going to beat USC. I think USC is going to get in a situation where they can't score 45 points, and Notre Dame is going to be able to score on them because their defense is just terrible. Okay, so yeah, I want to move on now. Like I said, that was the national stuff I wanted to talk about. The rest of it's going to kind of be Ohio State focused. I have the next thing is Ohio State's remaining schedule. I want to get into this because to me, I think that the way the bye week fell this year is interesting, but I think that it fell at a good time simply because of how the Notre Dame game went. But I mean, the rest of this schedule is kind of a gauntlet, and I mean, people can hate on Big Ten all they want. Yeah, there's a couple bad teams in here, but there's some games in here that are, I mean, any team could lose these games at any point, and if you think you couldn't, you're just lying to yourself. You see a team like Georgia go out and struggle with Auburn, but there's a lot of games on this schedule that any team could lose at any point. So let's go ahead and get into it. The first one, obviously, this weekend we have Ohio State versus Notre Dame. It's at Ohio State. It's going to be a noon kickoff. Um, I mean, this thing I'm looking at here kind of shows the ticket prices. That may be a good game if you want to like take your kid to go see a game or something. It looks like the prices are not extremely outrageous. So again, I'm not promoting anything for anybody, but just a thought looking at it because it is a home game, and Ohio State has after that only 3 home games left, and one of them is versus Penn State, which is that one's going to be super expensive if you want to go to that. But all right, anyway, Ohio State versus Maryland. I think this is going to be a beatdown, really. I'm just going to be honest. I know Maryland's good. They can test our secondary, but I expect Ohio State to just kind of dominate this game and just, they're coming off a bye week. It's a team who's 5-0, so you can't take them lightly. Just take care of business, get them off the field, and move on. And then the next game is at Purdue. Things get a little wonky when they play at Purdue for whatever reason. It's like that for a lot of other teams in the Big Ten, especially Ohio State. But I don't think the Purdue team this year is good enough to take advantage of something like that. Ohio State should beat Purdue pretty easily. And then you have the next big time matchup of the year, Ohio State versus Penn State. Obviously, that's at the shoe. So, I mean, I think it's just going to be a hard fought game, and I'm not going to slander Penn State right now because they're playing well. And honestly, if their quarterback has time, he worries me because he'll sit back there in the pocket and he won't evade a clean pocket. And their receivers, while they're not like some dominant players, they definitely can get open if you give the quarterback time. I think that that's going to be a game where we may have to give up a little bit in the run game to make sure they don't kill us through the air, which I'm fine with doing that because I don't really, as much as Ohio State or as much as people talk about, I don't know why I said Ohio State, as much as people talk about Penn State's run game, I don't necessarily think that run game is going to kill you. And I think that if you just, if you don't put all of your resources into that run game, you could still hold them to a decent amount and then, completely shut down their pass game, make their quarterback uncomfortable. And then Ohio State follows that up with another big time game. I don't care what Wisconsin's record is, but Ohio State has to go play at Wisconsin. It's probably going to be a night game. Listen, I don't care what their record is. Luke Fickell is a hell of a football coach, and he could put up a game plan defensively to hold Ohio State to a reasonable amount because their offense is not great. It's probably not going to be great, and Ohio State's defense is probably going to have their way with their offense. But again, I could easily see this being maybe like a 1-score game or like maybe a 10-point game. And I mean, again, it's on the road, and Wisconsin's not an easy place to play either. They get kind of hype out there. And like I said, Luke Fickell against Ohio State, it's always going to be a storyline. It's always going to be something where you could see a potential, really good game plan put together, and that game can be closer than what everybody thinks. It might end up being a scare, but I do think Ohio State gets the win there. And I'm going to circle back because the original question was, can Ohio State win out on the schedule? I think Ohio State beats Penn State. I mean, again, they look a lot better this year, but I need to see James Franklin beat Ohio State beat Ryan Day before I'm going to say that he will, just simply because they seem to always hold in the games and then get out coached late in the games or out athleted something. But I think Ohio State wins that game, and then they go at Rutgers. That should be an easy win. I mean, again, Rutgers, like one of them teams, they can put together a little defensive game plan, but they're not going to have the offensive weapons or just the horses to keep up with Ohio State. So they should win that easily. You go into Michigan State. This is a late game at Ohio State. This is the game where they're wearing like their gray uniforms. Listen, they should be up for this game. Although Michigan State's record is not great, they are a team that Ohio State's really not ever going to take lightly. I mean, look at how many times in the past Michigan State, that jersey, that team, that college has ruined Ohio State's season. It's happened multiple times, and I don't think that they're ever going to take them lightly. So, again, I think that Ohio State will take care of business there. And then, let's see here. Sorry. Ohio State plays Minnesota after that. Again, Minnesota is one of those teams that it's a kind of a tough team. They're going to try to run the ball. They got good offensive linemen. But I think that, I think Ohio State will take care of business there. I don't see them really giving Ohio State a scare. Maybe for like a quarter or half, it's decently close. And then after that, Ohio State pulls away and takes care of business. And that leads us into the last game of the year. Obviously, at Michigan in the big house. Probably going to be at least one undefeated team, maybe both teams undefeated. I mean, listen, you can't put enough on what that game means, and Ryan Day needs a win. He really does. I think that for his mental health, if anything, he needs a win because I don't know about you guys, but having a man tell me that I'm soft and that I was born on third base and then beating me back-to-back years would fuck with me mentally. And I'm assuming that it did Ryan Day because he's someone who constantly talks about mental health and stuff like that. I don't know, man. He needs a win. He's going to have to take care of business. But I think that Ohio State has the team this year to beat Michigan. You look back at the last 2 years, and I thought Ohio State was going to beat them then also. So whatever. I have a biased opinion. But I also knew that Ohio State's defense was not great, and it could be had. This year, I don't necessarily feel that way. I don't think that Michigan's going to be able to rattle off more than 30 points on Ohio State. And I don't know if they're going to give up 30 points to anybody on the schedule. I mean, maybe Maryland. No, not Maryland. Maybe Penn State. I don't know. That would have to be a hell of a game for Penn State. But I'm super confident in this defense. I think that we're letting our athletes go out there and be athletes. And I think that that's going to cause some problems for Michigan because in 2021, Michigan was able to just run the ball in Ohio State. I think they only threw the ball like once in the second half or something, and they won the game easily. That's not just a toughness issue, and people can say that if they want. I don't care. It's not a toughness issue if somebody can run the ball and that's it on you. What that comes down to, in my opinion, is a schematic issue. And if you look at Ohio State's linebackers back then, they didn't know how to play the run at all. They were all playing. They were reading and reacting, but they were not reacting fast enough. Offensive linemen could just double team everyone and then get to the next level. Again, and then you fast forward that to 2021, Ohio State was kind of selling out to stop the run, and Michigan did exactly what they needed to do in that situation. They took advantage of it using like double route or double moves and shit like that to get their guys open. So it's kind of like we went one way really bad, we swung it back the other way like a pendulum. We just need to meet in the middle, and I think that that's what this defense is this year. I think it's a perfect balance of stopping the run and the secondary being good enough to hold up, also with not blitzing so much because Jim Knowles has said it himself that he's not blitzing as much this year, and that's just something that, I mean, if your guys in the secondary are good, and you have your front seven or front six, however you want to call it, it's really a front seven. The way Jim Knowles does it, it's just different guys. You have Tommy Steele, and then you're either going to have a guy like Proctor, Lathan, or Sonny in run support. So really it is a front seven, but they're able to be multiple with it, which is cool. I like this defense a lot. So I really think that they're going to cause some problems for Michigan because I don't think there's not going to be too many easy access throws for J.J. McCarthy, and their run game is not just going to be able to – you're not just going to rattle off 7 yards of carry or 10 yards before contact like they did in 2021. That's not going to happen on this defense. So, again, I think they have the team to beat Michigan. I think that they finish this year out undefeated in the Big Ten, and they go to the Big Ten championship. I'm willing to stand on that. I don't care what anybody says. You can be mad or whatever. It doesn't matter to me. All right, so that's it for Ohio State's schedule. Now, the last thing I wanted to get into here, I have a little segment that I made. This is gonna be my first time doing it, but I do want to do this a few times throughout the year. This is gonna be my stay on pace segment. Basically, what I did is I dove into some stats for Ohio State. I looked at um, some offensive players. So I have like four or five offensive players I want to talk about, and then defense I have just one player I want to talk about, but also just as a unit what the defense is projecting to do. So let's go ahead and get into that. So the first player, obviously the one that everybody wants to talk about, Kyle McCord. Right now he has 1,055 yards, 6 touchdowns, 1 interception. So projecting that out, the way I did this, I just did it projected it out for 13 games. So the regular season plus at least a bowl game. Obviously, if they make the Big Ten championship, there's an extra game there. And then if they make it to the college football playoffs, there's potential for an extra game there. So I did 13. It could be as many as 15. So we'll see how that plays out. Anyway, Kyle McCord's at 1,055 yards, 6 touchdowns, 1 interception. Projecting that out for 13 games, he's looking at about 3,429 yards, 20 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. It's not really what Ohio State is used to right now with Ryan Day. I've been very vocal about how I feel like the offense could cause Ohio State to lose the game this year. I still feel that way. I still think that that's the case. So again, I hope that these stats start to look better as the year goes on. He starts to get more comfortable as quarterback one. Ryan Day continues to coach him up on game film. I think that Kyle McCord has the potential to be like a top 5 quarterback at the end of the year. But those stats right there, again, 3,400, 20 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. That would not be a great season for an Ohio State quarterback. But that really only matters if you lose. If they win all the games and that's what his stats look like, nobody's gonna care because there are two sides to the game. There's defense and offense. So. All right, so moving on to running back, I have TreVeyon Henderson, currently at 295 yards, 5 touchdowns through 4 games. He's on pace to fall just short of 1,000 yards and 16 touchdowns. So 959 yards, 16 TDs. Again, I mean, I could easily see this ramping up, especially with Trey doing things like he did last week, where he broke the big one against Notre Dame. Ohio State's coaches, if they want to have that big playability from TreVeyon Henderson, they're simply just going to have to give him more carries. I mean, there's no running back in college football that breaks big plays every single time they touch the ball. We hold our players to a standard that's higher than everyone else at Ohio State. At least our fans do. Their media does. I do. I know that for a fact. But the simple matter is with TreVeyon Henderson is that no one breaks long plays every single time they touch the ball. And Trey has gotten a lot better at turning those 3-4 yard carries into 5-yard carries and 6-yard carries. So again, I think if you just give him more touches, I think you're going to see more of those breakaway plays, maybe 2 or 3 of them a game instead of just one. And he's also getting those turning those short gains into a little bit longer gains like he's supposed to. I think TreVeyon Henderson has the ability to take this offense to another level. So hope they continue giving them the ball more, and I hope that his season finishes more like 1,200 yards, 20 touchdowns, instead of what I just said. And then moving into pass catchers, so I have Marvin Harrison Jr. He's currently at 336 yards, 3 touchdowns. That's on pace for 1,092 and 10 touchdowns. I mean, again, I don't expect Marvin to put up a crazy season statistically this year anyways. I never did, because when a player is as good as Marv was last year, then come the following year, you get all the attention. You look at Chase Young in 2019, his happened a little bit faster. Chase Young was completely dominant early in 2019, and then about halfway through the year, every single team came into the game with a game plan for him, and his stats slowly got less and less. He was still a dominant player, and he was still helping the team overall, which is kind of what Marv is doing. Again, his stats are not going to be crazy stats this year probably, but I do think that he's going to go for 100 and against some of the good teams. He's going to be like that backbreaking player. And also, every single defense when Ohio State plays them, they have to account for Marv. They have to plan for Marv, and that makes it to where Emeka Egbuka and the guy I want to talk about after that can kind of get off on teams, which we saw that versus we saw that versus Notre Dame. So Emeka Egbuka currently at 263 yards, 3 touchdowns, on pace for 855 and 10 touchdowns. I actually think that he's probably going to end up over 1,000. Teams are realizing now that the way to slow down this Ohio State offense is to take away Marvin Harrison Jr., and that's just going to allow Emeka Egbuka to continue eating, and I think that he will. I mean, Emeka's just gotten better and better as he's been here, I think, and he made some of the biggest plays in the Notre Dame game. Obviously, was the leading receiver, so I expect him to be closer to maybe like 1,050 yards, 12 touchdowns. I don't know. I'm projecting a little bit. Then the last guy on offense that I wanted to talk about was Cade Stover, someone who, if he continues on the trajectory that he's on, he's going to have the best season from an Ohio State tight end that I've ever heard of. I don't know. Maybe there was some tight ends back in the day who were getting off, but Cade Stover currently has 240 yards, 0 touchdowns. Obviously, I'm going to sprinkle in, let's say, like 2 or 3 touchdowns, assuming that he gets the chance to get those throughout the entire year. But he's on pace for 780 yards, which for an Ohio State tight end is a crazy number. But I love what Cade's doing, man. He's gotten better at blocking as the year went on. And listen, I said this to some of my friends. I'll say it here. I don't know what it is. I don't know if Cade Stover's a good route runner. I don't know if it's just a mismatch for guys that are defending him. But when he runs routes, he gets open. And that's the one thing that I can say about him. If he has a guy guarding him in man coverage, he's going to get separation. He's a big-ass dude, and he's sure-handed for the most part. Obviously, he had a couple drops last year, but in no other sport are you going to look at a player playing well and be like, oh, well, but last year they did this. That's not how it works. It's just simply not. People put work in to get better. So Cade Stover had a couple drops last year. I'm guessing he busted his ass on the jugs machine and got his hands right, because this year he's looking super physical, and he's looking like if you throw the ball to him, he's going to catch it. So, yeah, I'm loving what I'm seeing out of him. And then the last couple things here, I wanted to get over to the defensive side of the ball. The only player I wanted to talk about on defense was Tyleik Williams. Currently, he has 21 tackles, on pace for 68 tackles. Again, I don't know what that means, like in the grand scheme of things, in terms of like how many tackles. Like obviously, there's people on the team with more than Tyleik, but I feel like 68 tackles, 21 so far, is a huge number for a defensive lineman, an interior defensive guy. And just watching the games, Tyleik has been dominant all year. So I'm loving what I'm seeing from him. I hope that he keeps that pace up, and if he does, I think he's going to end up being a first-round pick, which I would love that for him, because so many people were talking shit about him, calling him lazy and all kinds of other bullshit that you could just tell was not true. But, right now it's his time. I keep tweeting out hashtag 91 is free, because he had the free 91 tweets. All right, so the last couple of stats here. Currently, Ohio State's defense has 5 sacks. I really think this number is probably like 6 or 7, but they didn't count a couple of them. But anyway, I'm going to go with 5. That means they're on pace for only 16 sacks in the year. Now, if I'm looking at last year, total sacks per team, that would put Ohio State about 125th in terms of total sacks for all of college football. That's just simply not good enough. Obviously, they played a lot of teams who've gotten rid of the ball earlier, who've just ran the ball. So maybe that'll pick up as they get on. But also the competition is going to get harder, so I don't know if they're just going to dominate the defensive line, or, the quarterback's going to be a little more mobile in a lot of these games. So, it may not pick up. I don't know. That's not a really impressive number at all. You look at 2019, Chase Young had 19 himself, and right now our team is on pace to hit 16. I don't know what the problem is. I know they're not being as aggressive, but at the same time, it's, those defensive linemen have to get after it. They need to get out there and make some plays. And then the last stat I wanted to talk about here was pass breakups. Moving on from the line to the secondary. So far they have 17. Now, I didn't look at what Ohio State had last year, but what I did look at is projecting that out. If they could keep the same pace that they're at now, they would finish with 55 pass breakups, which will put them top 20 in all of college football. I mean, again, that's a phenomenal number. I love seeing that from them. The secondary is greatly improved, and I think that that is going to be probably the unit that's the most important to this team on this national championship run that they're trying to go on. So, first Big Ten championship, obviously, then national championship. All right, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up here. Not a super long show today, but I did want to get one in and go over just a couple of those things. Starting tomorrow, we're going to be kind of digging into the Maryland game, looking at what their season has looked like so far, and what I expect Ohio State to do to be able to do against them. As always, leave a like, hit the subscribe button, come in the comments. But peace out. You guys have a good day, and I'll see you tomorrow.